Good morning and welcome to UUCC, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua. We are coming together this morning remotely by necessity. My name is Jeff Gretton, and this morning I would like to share some journeying experiences under the topic of moments of engagement. There is one announcement. The UUCC has committed to support the Justice for Migrant Families effort in their work with Batavia detainees. We try to bring attention to this effort on the second Sunday of the month, but that announcement has been overlooked recently. So this is a special request to ask that you consider sending a special donation to this organization, either to the UUCC, noting your intention, or directly via their website, which is at www.justiceformigrantfamilies.org, all one word. Now we will enter a space of worship. Please join me in lighting our chalice. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. Sometimes the path forward in life is not clear at all. I found myself in such a quandary in my late 20s. I had taken an undergraduate degree in chemistry, but not used it. I had been working in the masonry trade for 5 years, but did not really consider that a future. I'd taken a graduate degree in teaching high school science, but when I actually found myself in a classroom, I found it quite different than I had envisioned, and it did not go well. I was working with a friend setting up a pottery, but we lost access to the property we were using and the project came to a halt. There was no clear path forward and a degree of frustration was in the air. Well, we knew of a pioneer pottery project being set up in Botswana by a British potter who was a specialist at building a pottery with the resources at hand. My friend was a trained potter with experience, and I was a mason and chemist, sort of. And this sounded like a worthy project where we could make a contribution. So off we went.
sorry.
Oh, we've lost our cursor, so we can't do the stop share.
Okay.
What we're looking for.
Sorry.
Oh, a second.
Can I go? Are we good to? I'm viewing it. Sorry.
You need to cancel the video.
Pardon?
You need to cancel your screen video.
Cancel spotlight video.
Got it. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that was us. Okay.
Okay.
You
I'm
go
gonna
ahead, Megan.
Okay. Sorry about that. First time doing online worship assistant. We're gonna do joys and sorrows now. We are a community that holds one another in our celebrations and in our pain. Please share your joys and sorrows in the chat box in Zoom or the comment section if you're with us on YouTube. Know that whatever your heart is holding today, we are with you. We hold all these and all the biggest feelings in our hearts together. We're now going to do the offering. Now is the time in the service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. If you would like to give to this morning's offering, you can give online at canandaiguauu.org/connect or physically by mailing a check to the church. In either case, note that you'd like your gift to go toward the Sunday offering, and we'll share 1/4 of it with our monthly service partner, Happy Tales Shelter, which is part of the Ontario County Humane Society.
I found this poem called Detour by Ruth Feldman. I took a long time getting there, much of it wasted on wrong turns, back roads riddled by ruts. I had adventures I never would have known if I'd proceeded as the crow flies. Superhighways are so sure of where they are going, they arrive too soon. A straight line isn't always the shortest distance between two people. Sometimes I act as though I'm heading somewhere else while imperceptibly I narrow the gap between you and me. I'm not sure I'll ever know the right way, but I don't mind getting lost now and then. Maps don't know everything. And I would add my own words. Nothing in your life is ever wasted. It may not be clear why or where it is going, but if you engage your present with all your passion, all your capability, if you engage your present with an open mind and an open heart, it will never, ever be wasted. And that experience will serve you well at some point in the future. I would like to start by speaking of a moment of engagement in Iran. I had gone to Iran to make money. In 1976, the Shah was in power, and there was a huge American presence in Tehran. Travelers could make money under the table teaching English in Tehran, especially American English, because if you were an Irani and you had a little English, you could get work with the Americans. Well, we had a contact in Tehran, and it was not too long before it was circulated in the teaching community that there was a qualified science teacher in town, me. Very quickly, I found I was offered a job at an international school in the northern part of Tehran. It was a legitimate job, credentialed. I needed a work permit. I was finishing the year for a teacher they had lost unexpectedly. Her husband's company had transferred him out of the country. I believe it was Bell Helicopter, if I recall. So I found myself teaching middle through high school science, chemistry, and physics. They needed me and were willing to work with me with my needs. I needed a place to stay, so they cleaned out a storeroom and let me stay in the elementary school, which was in the same school, but a different building from where I actually taught. It was also in northern Tehran. Tehran is built on a mountain, and in the south, it's low and smoggy and dirty. But in the north, you're up the mountain and it's much cleaner, cooler, and scenic. I had the mountains just outside my door, just about. Well, to get to school where I was teaching, I had to walk down to the main road and then catch a taxi. I would walk through a labyrinth of roads and alleys. It was a residential district full of brick houses with high walls around them. But along my way, there was a blacksmith shop, and I would sometimes stop at the blacksmith shop and watch them work. One of their main tasks was sharpening pickaxes. To do that, the blacksmith would put the pickaxe in the fire, get it red hot, bring it out, put it on the anvil, and there was a circle of guys around the anvil, and they would, in succession, hit it with their hammer. Bang, 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 bang. So I would watch them work at this. I was largely ignored. I was obviously a foreigner. I didn't speak any Farsi. And at the time I had rather long hair, which set me apart rather dramatically. So you can imagine my surprise when one morning they motioned me in, said, "Here, wouldn't you like to try your hand with the hammer?" Well, this was something I knew how to do. I'd worked in the masonry trade for 5 years. I was fit, and I was pretty familiar with hand tools, so I was quite happy to take my place around the anvil. I'm not entirely sure what they were thinking, but I suspect it may have had something more to do with entertainment than edification. So I took my place, they brought out the pickaxe, and so we went around bang, 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 and shaped the pickaxe into its proper shape. He would touch a piece of wood to judge how hot it was and then quench it in a bucket of water to temper it and bring back the hardness. Well, I filled my task quite adequately. And when we were done, we all stood up and they smiled and congratulated me on my success. And I smiled and was quite pleased with myself. And then I picked up my book bag and carried on to my teaching job. Well, this encounter was pretty brief and limited, but given the demands of teaching and the circumstances of my living situation, I really didn't have much of a chance to get to many glimpses of the real Iran, the real ancient Persian culture that carried on despite the injection of wealth from oil. So this moment of engagement is one I remember fondly. From Iran, we flew to Kenya, and in Kenya, we were looking around for an interesting place to explore. We settled on the Tana River Basin, which is on the east coast of Kenya. The Tana River meanders through a low, flat, jungly area before it flows into the sea. You could get a bus to the town at the mouth of the river, but we wanted to go to a village called Ozi. To get to that village, we needed to walk for 4 hours and cross the river, wading through very, very deep mud to clamber onto a boat that would take us to the other side. In other words, it was remote. And when we entered this little village of Ozi, we found ourselves in another world. We were very unusual visitors. We were greeted by the head policeman. We were greeted by the school teachers. These were young men from the city who worked for the Department of Education and had been assigned to this remote village to set up and teach a school. And they were not entirely happy with their situation. We were invited to share a meal with the policeman, which we gladly agreed. The meal was a typical meal of the region, cornmeal boiled to a thick consistency, rather like polenta, and a rich dipping sauce with vegetables and some meat to dip the cornmeal in, but most of the calories came from the corn. Well, in conversation with this policeman, we found that what had happened, we were engaged in a moment of scarcity. The harvest was approaching, but it hadn't happened yet. Some crops had failed. Food was scarce. In that village, if you wanted a banana, and we did want a banana, we carried staples in our bag, but we relied on finding fruits and vegetables along the way. In that village, bananas weren't just expensive, they didn't exist. You couldn't find one no matter how much money you had in your pocket. I have never been in such a situation before, or nor have I since. It was a real eye-opener. We found the people in the region proud and competent. They had retained their traditional culture. There were many different small villages along the river, and each had its own language. So it was quite a remote area. We wanted to explore a bit, so the policeman set us up with a couple of guides. These fellows were hunters, poachers, if you will. They knew everyone up and down the Tana and could speak the different languages. When we left the village, these fellows collected their weapons from the bush where they had stashed them before they went into the village, and one had a spear, the other had a bow and arrow. And these fellows showed us a memorable bit of their world. We saw elephants and hippos and crocodiles, many of them much closer than one would have imagined. But we were under the guidance of a couple of masters, and they were certainly wanted to keep us out of trouble, which they did. But there was one moment I particularly remember. We had walked to the ocean. This was near the equator, so it was hot and humid and teeming with mosquitoes. We caught some fish, cooked dinner, had a lovely evening, and we were settling down for the night. We watched our guides pull out their mosquito nets and start to set them up. Well, we were newbies. We didn't have mosquito nets. As a matter of fact, all I had was a down mummy bag, which I had brought from the States. There was no choice of sleeping outside the bag. The mosquitoes were ferocious. So I spent a very hot, miserable night in that mummy bag with only my nose showing out the mouth of the bag and a cloud of mosquitoes outside the bag feeding on my nose. Meanwhile, our guides spent a comfortable night under their mosquito nets. Happily, that sleeping bag was stolen sometime after that, and I replaced it with a bag that was more appropriate to the climate. And we got ourselves some good mosquito nets, which we used to good advantage. As for my nose, it was itchy, but it was okay. So we stayed for a while in Kenya, but at some point I had to make a decision, north or south. North was Europe, where we could work again. South was South Africa, where there was work. But I ran into a couple of Canadian fellows. They had been watching a small cargo boat for several weeks that would sail to Madagascar. Cargo boats have no schedule. They sail when they have cargo, and this one was ready. So I made my decision to rejoin these guys heading south towards Madagascar, which meant I eventually ended up working in South Africa. We bought deck passage on this boat. That means that we didn't have a cabin. We were to live on the deck. We did have shelter if it rained, and it was November in the Southern Hemisphere, so that's summer, so being cold really wasn't a problem. We were told by the booking agent to bring our own food, so we showed up with our bags of food, and the boat pulled out of the harbor of Mombasa in the coast of Kenya, headed for Madagascar. The captain and the crew were Malagash, meaning they were from Madagascar. And we told the captain not to worry. We had food, no need to be a trouble or a bother to them. We would take care of ourselves. And we settled in on the deck. But it was not very comfortable on the boat. The crew was not friendly. They ignored us. We couldn't seem to strike up a conversation. They didn't seem to want anything to do with us. And this was disappointing because we had heard some very nice things about the Malagasy people, their friendliness and openness. It also seemed that whenever we settled down, that would be the next place they chose to paint. This is what sailors do out on the ocean when there's not a whole lot to do, they paint the boat. So we found ourselves avoiding wet paint again and again. Well, this went on for several days until we ran out of food. Then we had to go to the captain and ask, please, if we could share some of his food because we were run out. That's when we found out that bringing food was a really bad idea. In Madagascar, it's considered quite rude to refuse food and drink. So by keeping to ourselves with our own food, we'd offended the captain and the entire crew. In addition, this group was particularly sensitive because before us, some South Africans had taken passage on that boat, and they had made a point of avoiding the crew because they were Black. So having to go to the captain, cap in hand, changed the dynamics of our relationship on the boat entirely. We were invited for beers with the second engineer in his cabin. We started to get language lessons. We wanted to learn a few words of Malagash. The crew was friendly toward us, and certainly we ate about 100% better. The boat had a cook on board, and he was pretty good. Towards the end of that voyage was the moment I remember the best. We had spent the night on the deck between the holds. The hold is where the cargo was. They were in the middle of the boat. The holds were covered by a cover which sealed them, and these covers extended up above the deck surface. So between the two holds was a little alley that was sheltered from the wind, and that's where we had spent the night. The morning was beautiful and sunny. There was a fresh breeze coming off the ocean. The ocean had a swell to it, so the boat was riding up and down this swell. But then something felt a little different. Something changed. The bow of the boat then dug into the next wave, and some water actually came onto the deck at the front of the boat. Well, then the front of the boat starts to rise up again, and this water comes flowing back towards us. We could see it coming, and we jumped onto the covers and got ourselves and our sleeping bags out of the way as this water came rushing by exactly where we had been lounging just a moment before. Was this a problem? Were we in trouble? We looked around the bridge, which was behind us, and there was the captain and his officers lined up watching us, enjoying themselves. It was obvious that this incident was completely intentional. They just wanted to see us jump, and jump we did. And that was the moment of engagement I remember most fondly of our voyage to Madagascar. Finally, I would like to speak of a moment of engagement with an elephant. We need to skip forward 4 or 5 years. I'd been working in South Africa and Zimbabwe. I owned a car, and I was driving from north to south through the Kruger National Park. The Kruger Park is a huge park in the eastern part of South Africa, which was very wild. It was set aside while it was still wild, and it still is. You must drive through the park. You're not allowed to walk in there. And if you stay overnight, you must stay in the park accommodation, which is a compound surrounded by a fence. There's food and cabins there, and you can camp if you wish, but it's protected. So we were driving along a riverbed. It was a broad, shallow riverbed. The river kind of meandered down through the middle of it, but mostly it was dry, at least that time of year. And we noticed that moving across this river basin was a group of elephant. There were 3 adults, 2 youngsters. Well, this was kind of unusual. We didn't see family groups of elephants very often. So we positioned ourselves where we could watch down the road where the elephants would come up out of the riverbank and cross the road at a safe distance. Well, the elephants must have changed their trajectory as they came across the river, because instead of coming up out of the river down there where we expected it, they came up right here next to us. And when that lead female elephant saw us sitting there, she raised her trunk, trumpeted very loudly, and started running straight towards us, along with the rest of them. Well, we wanted to get out of there, of course, but we were facing in the wrong direction. I had to turn the car around. I backed up, and as I was pulling left to head down the road, we could see out of the right-hand side of the car these elephants bearing down on us, and they were close, way too close. Well, we tore off down the road, and the elephants bore to the right into the bush, crashing away, making quite a noise. They did not follow us down the road, so we were good. We were safe. We slowed down and stopped. And when our hearts started beating again, we analyzed the situation we had just been through. We concluded she must have been able to catch us up. She was so close. But we were doing exactly what that mother elephant wanted us to do, and we were doing it as fast as we possibly could. I believe that was good enough for her. I think she slackened her pace so she wouldn't catch us. I believe she let us go.
got out of town on a boat going to southern islands, sailing a reach before a following sea. She was making for the trades on the outside, and the down to run to Papanete. Off the wind on this heading lie the Marquesas. We got 80 feet of the water line, nice and making way on a noisy bar in Avalon. I tried to call you, and on a midnight watch I realized why twice you ran away. Think about how many times I have fallen. Spirits are using me, larger voices calling. What heaven brought you and me cannot be forgotten. I have been around the world looking for that woman and girl who knows love can endure, and you know it will. When you see the Southern Cross for the first time, you understand now why you came this way. 'Cause the truth you might be running from is so small, but it's as big as the promise of a coming day. So I'm sailing for tomorrow, my dreams are dying, and my love is an anchor tied to you, tied with a silver chain. I have my ship, and all her bags are flying. She is all that I have left, and music is her name. Think about how many times I have fallen. Spirits are using me, larger voices calling. What heaven brought you and me cannot be forgotten. I have been around the world looking for that woman and girl who knows love can endure, and you know it will. And you know it will. So we cheated and we lied and we tested, and we never failed to fail. It was the easiest thing to do. You will survive being bested. Somebody fine will come along, make me forget about loving you. In the Southern Cross, in the Southern Cross.
Thank you, Bill. That was lovely. That is a favorite, as you might have guessed. I mentioned earlier that the goal of the journey was to get to Botswana. I traveled for 6 years and never made it to Botswana. My friend did get there to Botswana, but by then the pottery had folded. There was nothing for him to do. So as for the goal, the journey was quite the failure. As for the experiences and life lessons and moments of engagement, well, none of that was a waste. A straight line isn't always the shortest distance between two people. And now won't you join me in extinguishing our chalice? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.